overnight, temperatures staying up in the teens in many spots. The brightest conditions for the start of Wednesday will be in the south, and it will stay dry here with sunny spells and a warmer feel. Further north, a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain continuing for the north and west of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, with gusty wind making it feel on the cool side. Thursday and Friday, I think, more widely drier and more settled. Still some rain in the far northwest, whilst the southeast turns hot.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hey, welcome to the Mark Steyn Show, on your telly and on your wireless according to your orientational inclination. As you know, we're very partial to that great line by Ring Lardner from his story The Young Immigrants about a century ago. Shut up, he explained. The big shut up is rampant in our society. We try to pierce through it on GB News because, in case you hadn't noticed, we've had 2 years of lockstep groupthink media and everything's kaput, from the NHS to the baggage carousel at Terminal 3. So tonight, 3 topics that interconnect in various malign ways: the record-breaking tide of migrants, the uselessness of the police, and the acceptance up and down the land of grooming gangs, ghastly and evasive euphemism. Kelvin Mackenzie, Harvey Proctor, and a victim of the child sex exploitation now endemic in English towns, Samantha Smith. They're all here, but man cannot live on the woeful state of contemporary Britain alone, so music maestro Mike Batt is here to jolly us up. He started in the pre-lockdown era, when one could go underground, overground, wombling free without a vaccine passport. But he's managed to survive the age of Zoom call ensembles, and he's back with us, and we're happy to see him. Plus, your views on the passing charivari. You can email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. That's all coming up after Ray Addison with the latest headlines.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. A gunman has killed 6 people in the US city of Chicago. Police are still looking for the suspect who opened fire during a 4th of July parade in a wealthy suburb. A rifle believed to have been used in the attack has been recovered from the rooftop of a building overlooking the parade. The suspect is believed to be aged between 18 and 20. At least 24 people have been taken to hospital, and we'll bring you more on this story as it develops.
Our community was terrorized by an act of violence that has shaken us to our core. Our hearts go out to the families of the victims during this devastating time. On a day that we came together to celebrate community and freedom, we're instead mourning the tragic loss of life and struggling with the terror that was brought upon us.
Nancy Rotering there, the Mayor of Highland Park. Now, at least one person has died following a gas explosion at a block of flats in Bedford. 3 others were taken to hospital, with witnesses describing the scene in the Redwood Grove area as an inferno. One person was seen jumping from a second-floor window to escape the blaze. East of England Ambulance Service says a man was airlifted with serious leg injuries. 2 other people, including a firefighter, taken to hospital suffering from smoke inhalation. Resident Baljit Numon told us what she saw.
I just come back after shopping and driving down the road, and I saw a few people standing at the fence just here behind me, just sort of wondering what's going on here. And then in the distance I could see the flames coming from the roof of the building just behind us. There was so much smoke, lots of flames coming above, and just wondering what on earth has gone on here. And then after speaking to a few of the people that were there, they said they heard a big bang, and it actually shook the house. They felt as though it shook the house as well.
The man accused of shooting dead 3 people at a shopping centre in Copenhagen has been remanded in custody and will undergo a psychiatric evaluation. 2 teenagers were among those killed and 7 others were wounded, 4 of them seriously during the attack yesterday. Danish police say there's no evidence to suggest the incident was terror-related. The Prime Minister was aware of concerns about Chris Pincher's behaviour when he made him Deputy Chief Tory Whip. Downing Street says despite knowing about speculations, Boris Johnson did not think it appropriate to block his appointment. The Prime Minister is alleged to have called him Pincher by name, Pincher by nature. The MP was suspended from the Conservative Party and resigned after claims emerged that he groped 2 men last week. 6 new allegations have emerged since, dating back several years, all of which Mr Pincher denies. And EasyJet's Chief Operating Officer, Peter Bellew, has resigned as concerns grow over flight cancellations. The airline is struggling with industry-wide staff shortages that have forced it to cut services, often on the day they're due to depart over the holiday period. EasyJet's CEO says everyone at the airline is focused on delivering reliable services this summer. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now let's get back to Mark Steyn.
This week is a ginger growler of a week. You know how that works. First, you go to your packet of ginger growlers. That's as illustrated by Gary Lavin. Lovely, lovely stuff. You open it up, you grab a ginger growler and you toss it into the melee, and then watch the denizens of the Westminster Village obediently trot after it, like the well-trained poodles they are. Have you seen this report of young girls getting gang raped year in, year out in English towns? Oh, sorry, I'd love to read it, but I'm a fully credentialed investigative reporter, so I'm trotting obediently after this week's ginger growler. What about COVID vaccines causing a massive drop in sperm counts? Oh, I'll read it when I get back. Nothing wrong with my sperm count. It's off the charts every time some new ginger growler comes along for me to chase. Well, the first growler of the week for July is some bloke nobody had ever heard of until 20 minutes ago. He's a man called Chris Pincher. Altogether now, Pincher by name, Pincher by nature. As the already tedious joke has it, he's been known for over half a decade to have a penchant for pinching, but Theresa May chose to rehabilitate him, brought him back into government and stuck him in the Privy Council. That's for life. Shame on you, Lady May. And so a serial pincher rose to be Deputy Chief Whip until he had to resign for drunkenly groping 2 men in the Carlton Club on Thursday night. I have to say that if I had to name a single demographic group anywhere on the planet I would be least up for copping a feel of, entirely on aesthetic grounds, it would be the membership of the Carlton Club. But chacun a son grope. The only element of this story that caught my eye was that it took place in the Carlton Club in St James's, and thereby embodied almost too perfectly this dismal twilight of British conservatism. There is still a Carlton Club, and it still has that magnificent portrait of the third Marquess of Salisbury at the foot of the staircase. But these days it is apparently no more than the gents at Piccadilly Circus once were, a conveniently central location for seedy cottagers in a hurry. The outward forms of British greatness are still with us. The splendid buildings, the great oil paintings, a pretty decent Dover sole in the dining room. But it's just dress-up games now, and even then you can't help noticing the furtive paw of some Deputy Assistant Lord Privy Seal creeping up your thigh. We need more than the dress-up games right now. Every minute you spend talking about the ginger growler of the week is a minute you're not talking about anything that really matters. We shall have a special later this week on those of your fellow Britons injured and bereaved by the COVID vaccines, because it is an unfolding disaster getting worse by the day, and the pom-pom girls of the groupthink media are still in 2021 propaganda mode. And Sajid Jabbit. We've still had no response to the questions we submitted, but Mr. Jabbit is still pushing jabs on anything that moves, notwithstanding the growing body of evidence that every additional jab makes things just a little worse. Then we have open borders and useless police. We'll be talking about both in a few minutes with Kelvin McKenzie and Harvey Proctor. But they intersect across towns up and down the realm, where multi-culti squeamishness about Pakistani Muslim, Asian rape gangs, combines with a wholly corrupted police culture to ensure that young English girls can be gang raped and raped again and raped some more over and over for years on end. Rotherham, Rochdale, Oldham, oh well, say the cynics. They're just northern working class towns. Who cares? Oh yeah, northern working class towns like Oxford, Banbury, Aylesbury, all getting a bit leafy now, isn't it? Almost as if in a land without shame, turning a blind eye to child gang rape leads to more child gang rape. And as I always say, let's swap the casting and imagine what would happen if Pakistani Muslim girls were being gang raped on an industrial scale by white working class Englishmen. Do you think the media would be discreetly referring to them as quote-unquote European men? Would Labour MPs be telling the girls they ought to put up with it in the interests of diversity? Let me know what you think. Our email address is gbviews@gbnews.uk. Telford. Not sure whether that counts as northern, like Rochdale, or leafy southern, like Aylesbury. Telford, in fact, is a so-called new town. It's in beautiful Shropshire. But in barely half a century of official municipal existence, Telford has managed to acquire more dark secrets than many millennium-old cities in England. Samantha Smith is one of many victims of the awful code of silence attending these dreadful acts, and she joins me now. Samantha, Telford officially is about half a century old, and the roots of the so-called child sex gangs in that town go back so deep. It's almost as if as soon as Telford was invented and put on a map that this stuff started.
Well, I was raised in Telford. I've been in Telford for most of my childhood and a fair bit of my adult life now, and I like to think of it as a microcosm of socio-political issues that go on in larger towns and cities like Manchester, like Liverpool and like Nottingham. Telford is tiny in population. It has a population of about 157,000, which is very, very small, and yet it has the highest recorded rate of child sex crimes in the UK, 18.4 children per 10,000 in Telford against a national rate of 7.9. Telford is largely ignored by the national media because it isn't newsworthy, and the girls that fall victim, like myself, to grooming, to CSA or to CSE are seen as...
Just to explain, because we're all familiar, these reports get released twice a week now. But just explain for people who don't follow them what CSE and CSA stand for.
Well, CSA is child sexual abuse. That encompasses most child sex crimes, so whether it's rape in the family, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's grooming, whether it's CSE, that's the sort of umbrella term. CSE is group-based raping, exploiting and grooming of children. And let's be clear here, the victims of these crimes aren't young women, aren't prostitutes, aren't madams, they are children. And the perpetrators are adult men. And in Telford, CSE has been rife and continues to be rife in any estate up and down my area. You can go to Sutton Hill or to Woodside or to Brookside and see it in action. People act as though it's, and when these reports are released, it's the same lines that are paraded out, that, oh, these are crimes of the past, lessons have been learned. No. Girls on the ground, like myself, know far too well that these aren't crimes of the past. CSE, CSA, grooming, they're not things that have gone away. They continue to affect predominantly white working class girls in towns and cities like Telford.
Well, the police, I mean, this again becomes so familiar, but in the police are particularly bad in Telford because at the time this came out, they identified, I think, over 1,000 girls, and uniquely, the police in Telford said, oh, no, that's just media talk. It's way less than that. I would bet, if anything, it's way more.
Absolutely. It's a cultural problem in areas like Telford. It's not just the police, it's the local council, Telford and Wrekin Council, did the exact same thing where they said that there was no need for an official independent inquiry into Telford in particular because, you know, there were already inquiries covering it. Everything was underhand and, you know, it was all under control. The girls they were being looked after. Absolutely not. Young girls like myself, like in areas like Telford, they are being left at the mercy of grooming gangs, at the mercy of men who are waiting to pluck them up from the streets and groom them, exploit them and rape them and encourage others to do the same. In Telford, we saw a succession of police, social services and councils and council officers saying that, you know, these are a couple of bad apples. This isn't a systemic issue. It absolutely is. And the fact that those in positions of power turned a blind eye for so long makes them just as culpable as the men that actually held girls down and raped them.
That's a good point, that they are just as culpable, because in your situation, the police basically thought it was your own fault and it didn't really matter. It wasn't a real crime worthy of their time.
I was sexually abused for nearly a decade by various men. I was abused from the age of 5 until the age of 14 and then later on by others as well. And when I first spoke about it with my social worker, I remember some of the comments that I received. I remember being told, if you were physically abused, why were there no bruises? I remember, you know, police officers asking, you know, did you consent? Was this something that you wanted? Did you...
Is that a common thing in Telford, that a 5 or 6-year-old is supposed to be capable of giving consent to a sexual relationship?
I mean, the law is very black and white. In sections 9 to 11 of the Sexual Offences Act 2003, it is illegal to have sex with a child under the age of 16, regardless of consent. It shouldn't be on the victims to prove whether they were abused or not. It should be on the perpetrators to defend their innocence in cases like this, in my opinion.
I forget what is Telford? West Mercia, Shropshire Constabulary?
Telford is West Mercia.
How many constables and other officers have resigned from West Mercia Police over their failures in Telford?
Not enough. Not enough. I mean, we've seen council cabinet members, the cabinet member for children and young people, resigning around the time that the whole CSE issue in Telford really blew up. And I just want to say, so I wasn't a victim of CSE in particular. I was groomed and I was raped for nearly 10 years by successive men. My experience in Telford is exactly the same when it comes to the response of police, local councils and social services in the way of victims being, in the way that I was raped, I was abused, I was exploited, and then I was made to feel as though I were to blame for the abuse that I suffered. Yes, there are nuances in the law, but it should never fall on the child to prove that they were abused, and it should never be the first response of police officers, of social services and of council workers to say, oh yes, but did that really happen? No child would make that sort of trauma up.
No,
what do you have to gain from that?
Well, and also if it starts as early as it did in your case, you don't actually have any memories that predate that. It's very difficult for you, I take it, because you didn't have a normal period. Your earliest memories are of this stuff happening to you.
CSE, it thrives on a culture of shame, blame and silence. When children are made to feel that the abuse they suffered is normal, that it's normal for them to be plucked from their homes and transported to kebab shops and takeaways and in taxi drivers' cars to be raped by various men, and the police or the GPs or the abortion clinics, when they come asking for the morning after pill week after week after week, then when they don't ask questions and when they villainize the children as sexually promiscuous or troubled or troublemakers, it perpetuates a cycle of victims being scared to come forward for fear of not being taken seriously, or even worse, criminalized for it.
I've heard that in so many towns, particularly Rotherham, where the police dismiss them as, quote, white slags and, quote, packy shaggers, as if someone is in a position to make those choices when they're, 9, 10, 12. But what do you make of you've been on a lot of TV and radio and magazines and newspapers in the UK. What do you make of the media's willingness to look away from the ugly truth of this?
I think it's interesting that cases like Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were all over the papers for months because it was jet-setting, it was high stakes, it appealed to this sense of morbidity that the public tend to have. They want to know about these ultra-rich, ultra-privileged lifestyles. But go down the street in my hometown and you can see grooming in action. You can see grooming gangs, you can see CSE, you can see children being raped and exploited and picked off the street and I know that the media doesn't like to say this, but the predominant victims, 95% of the perpetrators in cases of grooming are men, and the majority of victims are young, white, working class girls. And we do a disservice to victims to suggest that anyone can be a victim of this crime. It can happen to anyone. Yes, victims can be boys. Yes, victims can come from nice middle class families. Yes, victims can be any ethnicity, and yes, the perpetrators could be white British men, but that isn't what we're seeing in Rotherham, Rochdale and Telford. We're seeing young, white, working class girls from backgrounds not too dissimilar to my own being raped, exploited, abused and then brushed aside by those that are meant to help them.
Well, you mentioned Ghislaine and Jeffrey, and that is glamorous and jet-setting, but the media, on the other hand, are happy to obsess over an aging Radio 1 disc jockey who appeared on Top of the Pops in 1968. So you don't even have to be that glamorous. Is it because the hard, crude reality of, the multicultural society where white working class girls seem to be believed not just by the Pakistani gang members, but often by white coppers as being unworthy of caring about?
I mean, I think that the awful thing when it comes to media coverage and the lack of willingness of those in charge to pay attention to CSE and grooming is that, like you said, they don't deem the victims newsworthy. They don't deem these young children, these little girls, to be worthy of headlines and attention and help and support in the same way that they think that, like you said, an aging Radio 1 disc jockey or a New York socialite is worthy of 27 headlines about her haircut or what clothes they're wearing. In places like Telford, children have been ignored for so long that they simply stop asking for help. And I remember when I first came out and spoke about how I was abused, I remember feeling like a troublemaker, as though I was somehow burdening the police, burdening social services by coming forward and speaking about my experience, because quite simply they thought that girls like me weren't worthy of their time. that, you know, it was bound to happen anyway, because, you know, you sort of girls, that's what you do. You know, you get pregnant at 13, you get into a relationship with an older man. It's just you being promiscuous. It's where you come from. It's lack of education.
That's great. That's an amazing thing. The 6-year-old was asking for it. She was wearing a too short skirt. Absolutely, absolutely incredible. Maybe if Jeffrey Epstein had flown his Lolita Express to Telford, the media might be persuaded to take a bit more interest in this story. Thank you very much, Samantha. And I am amazed that you have managed to hold yourself together out of what happened to you from such a young age. We're going to stay on this story. And up next, we're going to get your thoughts on it. Plus, the Metropolitan Police, who seem to be as useless as West Mercia Constabulary, they've now been put under special measures. And one of their many victims, Harvey Proctor, is here to metaphorically urinate on their reputational grave. And Kelvin McKenzie and Mike Batt, Migrants and Melody. Don't worry, they're not going to do a duet together. Or maybe they will. I don't know. It's that kind of show. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
GB News is the People's Channel, so here's what the people are saying about the suddenly famous Mr. Pincher. James says it's difficult to know without knowing exactly what he's alleged to have done. Crotch-grabbing men while at parties after having one too many. Actually, I don't think they throw those kind of parties at the Carlton Club, do they? I think they would just... of chaps sitting around hoping to have a snifter of brandy in peace and quiet, and then Mr. Pincher comes a-calling. But maybe we will know more of this than we ever wished to. A Twitter user says, I think it is the issue that matters, and the other stuff is the distraction. I don't know quite what the issue is with... Listen, politicians only matter if what they are doing matters. So if they can't control migrants, if they can't do anything about the grooming gangs and the rape gangs in somewhere like Telford, then it's basically just a soap opera with rather unprepossessing characters. So you'd be better off actually watching Neighbours or Home and Away or Corrie than following the adventures of the Deputy Assistant Under Lord Privy Seal when he goes to the Carlton Club for a drink at the end of the day. Bob says Bob's theory is Tories would rather talk about this than talk about Brexit losses at £100 billion a year. You'd be more convincing if you made that a less round number, Bob. Or debt costing almost the same to maintain. Look, basically, we've spent all the money that's ever going to exist in the United Kingdom until the early 22nd century now. So we're way beyond that. Once you've spent as much as was blown through during lockdown, fiscal responsibility doesn't have much purchase on a chap. Donna says, nobody cares about Pincher, but we do care about the government's current tender of £2 billion worth of PCR tests. We know these tests are utterly bent, so what's this all about? The point of the PCR test is to enable third-rate television presenters, such as Mr. Jeremy Vine, to give the BAFTA performance for worst acting performance when he tests positive, and then I tested positive for the COVID today, and I've got a bit of croakiness. Thought I'd actually just got a bit of apricot flapjack from the tube wedged at the back of my throat, but it's in fact I turned out to be COVID. That's the only reason why we have these PCR tests. Complete waste of time. The Times today has a story we touched on last week with Palm Sandhu. Quote, the Metropolitan Police has been substantially under-recording crimes, including rape, stalking and violence, compared with other big police forces, raising concerns about the potential manipulation of statistics, unquote. Oh, you don't say. It's almost like it's a wholly corrupted institution from top to toe. One man who doesn't need to be told that is former MP Harvey Proctor, who wound up losing his job and his home and living in a garden shed because of the Metropolitan Police. How do you feel, Harvey, about these special measures? This is Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, which I don't suppose 1 in a million people knows what they are or what they do. Is this a real serious thing that's befallen the Met?
Oh, I think it is. It used to have a reputation worldwide. That has crashed, has been destroyed. Special measures for the Metropolitan Police, not before time. It should have come in years ago. I'm very pleased that someone is supervising the Met. And the people who should be supervising and holding the Met to account, the IOPC, the Independent Office of Police Conduct, and to a degree the Home Office, have faltered over the years in not holding the Metropolitan Police to account. I have tried to hold them to account in matters that I knew about.
Yeah, the last time you were on, you'd actually just sent a letter to the Prime Minister about your own experience because some ghastly failed Chief Constable, or whatever he's called, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, despite his failures at the Met, is to be wafted onward and upward in the British establishment. Did you ever get a response from the PM on that?
No. That is not a surprise. I don't think he replies to many letters that he receives. Perhaps he's doing other things.
Well, this is something he should be replying on. I mean, what is the base? Every time the police, for example, the highlight of Pride Parade from the Met's point of view, this was over the weekend, they showed one constable getting down on his knee to propose to somebody in the middle of Piccadilly, I think, and it's all terribly heartwarming. I'd be willing to put up with it if they actually, solved crimes, which they don't. Even the current figure of 6% is totally fake, it seems. And B, if they didn't just invent crimes, as they did in your case and many others.
Well, in my case, they were putting huge numbers of resources into what was called Operation Midland. At the same time, they were starving the Port murder inquiry in the East End of London, where there were 4 bodies on the streets of London, but denying the police in that area more resources. In my case, 20 police searched my house on the same day that 20 police officers searched the homes of Lord Bramall, Field Marshal Lord Bramall, and the homes of Diana Britton. Her husband had been a former Home Secretary, and we were all supposedly involved in Operation Midland. So I think the time has now come when there is a need for a full public inquiry into the Metropolitan Police Force. They are without a police commissioner. The new police commissioner, whoever he is, will need to have a guide plan as to what to do. There isn't a guide plan. You can't rely upon the Mayor of London or the Home Office to provide him with one. There needs to be a full public inquiry as to what has gone wrong with the Met this last 10 or 15 years.
But I accept that you could have a royal commission and they would put...
Royal commissions are very expensive, take too long. I think something a little less than a royal commission, but a full public inquiry. Without that, you'll get a new commissioner taking over, and unless he's from the outside, he will just continue to cover up the errors of Hogan Howe and Dame Cressida Dick. Now, you're right. Still, Lord Hogan Howe is in the line to become the Director General of the National Crime Agency, the equivalent of the FBI in America. And Dame Cressida Dick is still in the offering to become a peeress. Both should not happen.
Absolutely. Now, when you say someone from outside, my worry is that if you get... You know, if you put someone from Scotland or Northern Ireland in charge of the Met, that the club would still... I mean, do you think in the end they might as well, you know, bring some guy in from Canada or New Zealand or whatever?
It has to be somebody of quality and somebody that the people of the country can trust. When Sir Robert Peel, who originated the Metropolitan Police Force, set it up, he said that the object of policing was that the police must have the trust of the people and the ability to police London. They don't have that now. Trust has been lost. Trust is not gained overnight. No. It will take quite a considerable amount of change, inner change at the Met, for them to be able to police London in the future.
Sir Robert also said the police are the public and the public are the police. That's not how Cressida Dick or Hogan Howe thinks of it, is it?
Oh, no. They led the police, they protected the Metropolitan Police, they didn't learn from their errors, they covered them up. And lots of errors that they have covered up in the past have still to be uncovered. That's why I think a public inquiry could be helpful, not just to the people of London, but to the new commissioner who's going to take over the control of the Metropolitan Police, whoever he or she is.
Well, from your words to the Home Secretary's ear, because I think that's a very strong idea, bringing in an outsider, not corrupted by this terrible failed culture in British policing. But as I said, I don't know how far outside you have to go. Maybe you do have to go all the way to New Zealand. You've been through hell, and you're being very reasonable and moderate in what you're asking. And by the way, Prime Minister, this guy sat in the House of Commons for your party, and you owe him the courtesy of a response to his letter. Thank you very much. Oh, Harvey's book, Credible and True, the political and personal memoir of Harvey Proctor. He is credible and true, and you should read it. Thank you very much, Harvey.
Thank you very much, and welcome to London.
Thank you. The top story at The Spectator today is this. Quote, Tory MPs are in despair over the Chris Pincher scandal. That's Chris at right, casting an appreciative eye over the fetching musculature of the dashing young Chief Whip. What Conservatives ought to be in despair over is the total lack of conservatism after 12 years of Conservative Prime Ministers. For the first half decade, David Cameron focused on such core Conservative priorities as... Wait a minute, this is a blank piece of paper. Then Cameron got head-faked into the Brexit referendum, and when he lost it, flounced off in a big Queenie huff to bilk the international Yakfest circuit and charged 7 figures for 1-hour speeches about all his accomplishments. Don't know what he does for the remaining 58 minutes. And the next half-decade of Tory rule was lost to the deep state's subversion of Brexit. Then we got 3/4 of the UK, kind of, sort of, mostly out of the EU, and the Tories were free to prioritise such bedrock Conservative issues as net zero on the rare days the country wasn't totally locked down. But even by the standards of our dysfunctional, useless political class, the failure to do anything about so-called migrants is infuriating. Indeed, the Border Force, the Royal Navy and the Royal National Lifeboat Institute are now in effect running this racket in collaboration with the human smugglers. Kelvin Mackenzie was editor of The Sun in its heyday, back when it kept the Tories reasonably functioning. Kelvin, if the Tories just insist they can't do anything about this, it's just incredibly demoralising for the base, isn't it?
I think the significant issue is their failure to do anything about it will be much more damaging than anything that Boris might do in his years in there. This country wants something done, right? And I wouldn't be talking about 20% of the country, 30%. I would say 70 or 80%. And the other 30% want them in there because they're probably all going to be socialists, so that way you can keep the Tories out, right? So we know why they're affected. The other 70% don't want this. Why? You're talking about... So last year it was 28,000 people. Now, this country, as you may have noticed, Mark, is not doing too well economically at the moment. So we have not enough doctors, not enough teachers, and we've just made the whole thing 1,000 times worse, or 28,000 times worse, by having more and more people who need education, they need housing. Where is this money coming from? It's 2 and 3 million quid a week now. Oh, what's going to happen? And we've had another 10,000 in over the last few months, and nobody says anything. Boris doesn't say anything.
No,
he talks.
He doesn't want to talk about it.
He doesn't want to talk about it, and what he doesn't understand is if he did nothing else but solve that issue, he'd be in. Yes, he'd be in for a 3rd term. Yeah. He would be here forever. It is a massive, massive issue. And it's one of those things where if I come on to a show like yours and I say this kind of stuff, all that happens is you get the left piling, you racist, you ran the Sun, you're this, you're that. You know, they are stupid people. They're stupid people. And I don't know what to do about it.
But they call you racist anyway.
Yeah, they will.
So who... I mean, the thing about this is, why doesn't Boris just pull out of the European Court of Human? Why doesn't he say, we have a great legal tradition stretching all the way back to Magna Carta of restraints upon the sovereign, so we don't need some nice Azerbaijani or Albanian jurist pontificating on our immigration policy?
Right. So he doesn't say it because he fears that were he to say it, that the High Court, in revenge, i.e. the Lord Chief Justice and his mates, would then say, right, if that's the way you're going to start treating jurists, we are going to allow anybody to appeal against anything that you plan to do in relation to the migrants. So that is the problem. It's basically he's worried about the blackmail effect by our own judges against him if he acts against the European Court.
Do judges really have that much of a great reputation? I mean, what I don't get is if you are on some like rinky-dink island in the middle of the South Atlantic, your final court of appeal is the Privy Council, and they, on the whole, are generally restrained. They don't invent new rights or whatever. Why is it that uniquely it's English, Scottish, Northern Irish and Welsh whose citizens have less meaningful say in what goes on in their territory?
Well, it's very interesting. It's probably because those judges come from the liberal left classes, and it's like being in the BBC. You could not get promoted within the BBC if you were centre-right. It's impossible. It's the same. It's the same within the academic aspect of the jurists who run our country. So in America, right, they have what I think is a pretty good idea. They try and balance their Supreme Court politically. Right? Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's left. Who knows? Over here, don't even think about that. It's always centre-left, right? It's always looking on the side of somebody who turns up with a load of tears. It's a very interesting aspect. And why don't we change it? Why don't we change it? Because the truth about the matter is nobody in our country really has any power, to be fair. And even if you had Priti Patel here sitting here right now, she'd say exactly the same thing. I come up with my ideas, and then somebody goes to court and they get.
Well, but at some point, you're quite right. I mean, that's the bottom thing, and particularly the people's representatives have no power.
Yeah.
So you have a situation like the Rwandan thing, where the government of the United Kingdom is in favour of it, and the government of Rwanda is in favour of it. But then the Prince of Wales, all his chums seem to dislike it. So
do you know what? That made me throw up that because he describes it as appalling, and the reason he described it as appalling, not because for 1 minute does he think it's appalling. He described it as appalling because he was going to the Commonwealth Conference in Rwanda, and all his chums who are other Commonwealth Prime Ministers, he wanted to make sure, I want you to know that we have a migrant problem in our country, yes, but we don't want to solve it by dumping the people. Whether he believed it or not, it was just simply politics. It was absolute tosh.
Yeah, it was absolute tosh, and his solution then, I guess, is for the entirety of the Commonwealth, which is a third of the world's population, to move to the outskirts of Highgrove. That's his solution, is it?
Well, that is the best idea I've heard for a long time, because that is a huge estate down there, and I'll tell you what. And if he didn't want to be there, Princess Anne's estate at Gatcombe Park, 3,000 acres. I reckon we could get. What do you think? Perhaps 4,000 or 5,000 of the chums who've come across the channel.
Yeah, absolutely. Just this year's intake on England's southern shore will be moving to a nice bunch of semis that he's going to, organic semis or whatever you'd call them, that he's going to put up at Highgrove. You've solved the problem.
Exactly.
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kelvin Mackenzie. Marvellous stuff, and what a brilliant idea. I'd like to see them take that up at the Home Office. Stump the Steyn looms, as does Mike Batt. Don't touch that dial, we're coming right back.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Mike Batt is a singer, composer, lyricist, conductor, arranger, orchestrator, director. Everybody watching has some bit of Mike Batt lodged in his brain, from remember what a wumble you are, to the what is it? He's here, the Phantom of the Opera. But if you're any kind of writer, you say, never mind my big hit from 2006, 1983, 1947, 1892. Wait till you hear my latest song. So here it is.
Welcome to the Little Pink Theatre Show, or is it blue? That's up to you.
That's from the album Croix Noire, which is French for Black Cross, and Black Cross is a multimedia project that I saw described as, quote, neo-steampunk. You're going to have to help me out here, Mike. What is neo-steampunk?
I have no idea, but a very nice critic said in a very nice sentence, the rest of which I forget, that it was neo-steampunk. And it's kind of not anything. It's one of those things where we made the record, that we want to make it, and I'm afraid it's something I do in my life. And I don't... Yes, I'm very... Sometimes if I want to be commercially explicit, I can make a record that I'd like it to be a hit, right? Yeah. But this particular album, which I've made with a new creative partner, Jean-Charles Capelli, French guy, he and I have just made the record that... It's quite a long story to tell you, but so I'll keep it short. But it's got so many different styles in it that neo-steampunk is a good sort of all-around... I never heard of it before, but it'll fit, you know, because it's got ballads, it's got heavy metal bits on it, it's got weird... orchestrations. I mean, it's like Bartok having a love child with Frank Zappa.
Really?
Yeah. But I have to tell you that the interesting thing I find about this project, and the exhilarating thing for me, is that the singer, the hero of the comic, and I'm going to show you the comic because I brought it with me anyway.
Yeah,
there he is.
Up. Yeah.
His name is Ace Hansel Jr. Can you see that, guys?
Yeah.
And he doesn't exist.
That's fantastic. So you've got a singer who has no corporeal reality.
Well, what you just played on TV, which, by the way, was a TV premiere scoop first, did actually show that there is somebody on Earth who is the doppelganger of this guy. And he has been deeply involved in the creation of it.
Now, this isn't like X-Men 27, where it's an adaptation of 1960s superheroes or anything. You've actually done this multimedia thing where there's a record and there's a comic book and there's, I think, there's a game of some kind.
That's right, there's a computer game. And I just said to... we asked my friend David Quantick, the writer, I said, can you write us a novel for this? Because my friend... who's Ace Hansel Jr., who doesn't exist, but the real life one, he's got such an interesting storybook of this Croix Noire district. It's a French red light district, actually fictitious, but maybe not. and all his characters in it. And so we thought, this needs a literary base. We don't have a Tolkien to base it on. We don't have a J.K. Rowling to base it on. We want something new. Let's have David Quantick. He's a brilliant novelist as well as being a funny man.
So you've solved the problem in a way, because you've done, as it were, a musical adaptation of something that didn't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a brilliant... let me just ask you, broaden it out to a kind of general question. I saw some rather long think piece in the United States a couple of months ago, which said that music doesn't have as big a purchase on people today as music did in the 1970s, 1940s, 1920s, and that actually something has changed now.
Well, it has. And when I met this friend who's become a very, very good business partner as well, we have a company together, and we're like a duo, really, but he's half my age and much better looking, so he does the lead vocals and sings, but we've co-written the songs. And, you know, I said to him, what did you just say, that the music doesn't have a purchase?
Yeah.
I said that to him. I said, Jean-Charles, you know what? Music doesn't have that purchase anymore. So why don't we get some drama around it? Let's build backwards. Let's build upwards. Let's create this alter ego.
Yeah.
So here's somebody who doesn't exist, created by somebody who does exist, in the image of. And there's somebody else in this comic, by the way, Mark, who looks a little bit like somebody you know on the front there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be me, actually.
Let's have a look at that.
Yeah, he's a much better...
Wait a minute, what was it you said about your partner? Half your age and twice as good looking?
Yeah.
That's the version of Mike Batt, is half his age and twice as good looking.
Well, I'm the old colonel. I play the old colonel in the story. But anyway, it's 7 comic books.
Yeah.
One released every month, called Croix Noire.
Right.
And, you know... available in all good W.H. Smith and everything. And there's a record... I sound like a promotion man, don't I? But
no, you're doing... But as I said, I'm amazed at what you have to do now, because when Bono did his terrible Spider-Man musical, Spider-Man was already there. I mean, to be able to do this and construct it all from the ground up is amazing. I need to ask you, I forgot to ask you this last time, and I need to do this for one of our Australian viewers and a great fan of the Wombles, and her line on this, the whole Wombles thing, is that people get it wrong when they say the Wombles of Wimbledon, common are we.
Yeah,
and
they
in fact
put
it's
a comma
yeah,
after
the Wombles of Wimbledon,
comma
are we, and it's a savage indictment of the British class system.
I mean, a lot of people claim to have thought that when they first heard it. The Wombles of Wimbledon, common are we? Well, isn't that a more unusual thing to think? And isn't that a more unusual thing for a 5-year-old or 6-year-old to have presumed it was? I think it's a nice convenient thing to go back and say, oh, you know what, in the old days I used to think it was that. But how can you get it wrong? Wombles of Wimbledon, common are we? And who cares what it means anyway? But
when you wrote that, so the ambiguity appeals to you?
It never, ever... It was about 10 years ago, which is what? Probably 40 years after I wrote it. I wrote it in 1972, something like that. And only about 10 years ago, this theory came out that the Wombles of Wimbledon, common are we, was the actual way of understanding it.
Well, we'll leave it at that, Mike. Thank you very much, though, for our world premiere, and lots of luck with Croix Noire. It's a comic book, it's an album, it's a game. We'll see what else they manage to turn it into before they're through. Just quick bit of stumping. John Smith says, "Hi Mark, love your truthful blend of journalism. Is there any chance the farmers' protests in the Netherlands could get an airing now they've been joined by the fishing industry? We're going to get to that with Ava Vladingerbroek. We like to be authentic here, and she is an authentic Dutch lass." Twitter user says, "What do you know about Starmer's Durham fine?" This is one of those things I'm not meant to talk about. I think he's taken out an injunction against the press, and I'm not meant to mention it. I'm not meant to mention that he's appealing it. Is that what it is? So forget I mentioned it. And as a Canadian, I don't regard myself as bound by the jurisdiction of whatever cockamamie court he took his case to. That is going to do it for us. Dan Wotton's here to macerate your Monday. What you got, Dan?
Well, Mark, how do you feel about working just a little bit longer tonight? Are you up for that?
Okay, you slave driver, you.
Okay, look, get in a taxi, head across town, because we've got important issues to discuss, don't we, tonight, Mark? Your vaccine damage special coming up Wednesday night, and we're going to be previewing it on my show tonight. So finally, I get Mark Steyn, the A-lister, on Dan Wootton tonight. I'm very excited. So if you love Mark, you've got to stay tuned. I think you're going to be here about 10:15, right, Mark?
That's what we're reduced to on GB News. I'm going to be on Dan Wootton's show, propping up the whole thing. Don't miss a moment of that. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Showers easing overnight, fine for a time across Scotland, Northern England, Northern Ireland on Tuesday, but more rain turns up later in the day. The weather staying changeable in the north, drier further south as a ridge of high pressure begins to influence things a bit more this week. And so for some southern areas, no rain expected at all through the week, but there are showers to come for the north, and further showers are expected for northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, North Wales overnight. They will eventually mainly affect, say, northwest-facing coasts with drier and clearer spells inland, and a cool night to come. Temperatures dipping in the single figures in some spots. But a bright start for the south and the east, and actually a fine day for much of Scotland, Northern England as well, and into the Midlands we'll see some sunny spells. I think cloudier weather mainly for Northern Ireland, for parts of Wales, southern England, and temperatures across the UK close to average. We're looking at high teens, low 20s. But Tuesday afternoon brings with it more rain eventually for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland as well. And that rain spreads across the rest of Scotland into Northern England, North Wales overnight. It also turns breezier in the north, but as well as seeing that rain and the cloud topple in from the northwest, we'll see warmer air arrive, so it's not going to be as cool overnight. Temperatures staying up in the teens in many spots. The brightest conditions for the start of Wednesday will be in the south, and it will stay dry here with sunny spells and a warmer feel. Further north, a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain continuing for the north and west of Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, with gusty wind making it feel on the cool side. Thursday and Friday, I think, more widely drier and more settled. Still some rain in the far northwest, whilst the southeast turns hot.